For this high-end home decor idea, you're going to need some candle holders. I picked these up from Dollar Tree and I absolutely love them. And grab 2 of these cones while you're at it. I know what you're thinking. No, we are not going to make a Christmas tree. These can be used to make so many different things, and I'm going to show you one right here. First, we're going to need to get rid of all that plastic because we're not going to need any of it. And look how perfectly these fit right inside these little candle holders. I'm going to use nautical rope for this. You can use twine, you can use ribbon, take the idea and remix it into what works for you. I am going to let you know though, that unraveling this right here, prepare yourself. I was recently given a tip that works way better than the struggle I was having. When you're all done with that struggle, it'll be time to bring in the glue gun. We're gonna need to start this off by putting just a little smoosh of glue right at the bottom, grabbing one end of that mean old nautical rope and start raveling. It was at this point I was praying that this was going to go all the way up. I really did not want to have to unravel another one of these things. It took me like 10 minutes to get it from unraveling around itself. And then I was recently given a little tip to solve that. You tape one end down. See, I'm here for you. And I listen to my community when they give me tips. I'm passing it along so you don't have the same struggles I do. You take one end of the nautical rope, tape it down to a surface, and then it will easily untangle itself. Well, as you're untangling it, of course, stopping it from retangling it as you're untangling it, if that makes sense. The good news, my friends, is it only takes one nautical rope to be able to wrap both of these little cones. I was happy about that. One whole nautical rope goes completely around the bottom of each one of these, and then you get to split the third one in half so you can wrap it around the top. When you do get to the point where you're ready to attach the extra nautical rope so that they meet, try to make sure that you line everything up where the ends are, so this way you'll have it facing in the back. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little messy even as you trim off those sections. So as you're putting it out in your home for decor, you have any extra frizzy bits sticking in the back and no one's going to see any of that. I did make sure to glue down as much of the excess as I possibly could, and then I added on these for a little something extra and love how these turned out. Feel free to glue your pieces down onto the candle holders if you want. I did not, so this way if I want to switch out the candle holders as I change my decor in my home, I can absolutely do that. On a recent trip to Dollar Tree, I found these beautiful candle holders. Now, they are completely high-end on their own. I mean, seriously, look how beautiful they are. But guess what? We can stack them fairly easily. And I'm like, oh, I definitely got some scrap wood in my stash that we can make some really cool high-end pieces with these. For our bond, I'm going to be using some Gorilla Glue gel. You could use E6000, that'll work too. I highly recommend using something other than just some hot glue. That never seems to hold glass on top of glass or together at all for glass for me. So I like using something else. For the paint, we're going to be using some of this. Now use whatever paint you want. It's in my experience with glass, a chalk paint or a clay chalk paint or a multi-surface works best to get some really good solid coverage quickly. You do you. And I also like using a pouncer and tappity tap tap tapping the paint on that sucker versus a brush, again, with glass. You do you. It might seem a little textury at first, but that's usually okay. Most paints, at least the ones in my experience, especially this, it levels itself out. And here you might be like, Brandy, why are you using a pouncer on this wood? There's no real reason why I'm using the pouncer. Use a brush if you want. The wood is really rustic and it is not sanded down. So using a brush is going to work just as effectively if you use my little tip with spritzing some water over the rough edges. Absolutely sand your wood down if you want. I do not want to sand this down. One, I'm cutting video time, and two, I like rustic things. You see, this is completely rough, and you can take the pouncer or a paintbrush. You will use extra paint doing this, trying to get in those rough edges. So sanding it down will help prevent that, but also using a little spritzy spritz of some water will really get in those rough edges. And then you just come on in with some paints and you are done in just a couple seconds. And do keep in mind that you choose to use a pouncer or a sponge, because I use a sponge sometimes when I paint too. It is possible working with rough edged wood, it could get stuck in the rough edges. So might be best if you want to avoid possibly have that happen to you, just use a paintbrush. Once all the pieces were completely dry, I glued everything together and absolutely love how this high-end piece turned out. For this idea, it is super simple if you have the pieces. Now, this thing, I don't know where I got it from, people. I don't know where it came from, sorry. This joint though, I know I picked up from Dollar Tree, and we're gonna use this to plop a pretty stencil on and create a beautiful hanging wall decor piece. For the stencil portion, I'm gonna use some of my favorite texture paste. I do have this linked down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box if you're interested. I'm taking a little bit of black paint just to change the color of this. Feel free to keep yours white or whatever color you wanna turn it, my friends. And if you just wanna use some paint and do a regular stencil, by all means, that'll work too. Normally, and most of the time, I highly recommend you using some painter's tape to tape your stencil down whenever you're creating a raised texture look. Lately, I've been making pieces that are like way bigger than what I'm putting them on, so I have nowhere to tape it to. So I'm carefully holding that sucker on there, praying I don't make too much of a mess underneath the stencil. And I think it turned out pretty good. For the attachment, I'm going to use a little bit of wood glue and hot glue just to put this onto our dowel that we have here on the hanging piece. Feel free to use whatever brackets or whatever extra glue you want to be able to accomplish this. I was content with my hold and love how this turned out. If you want to seal over it, by all means, grab you some Mod Podge and plop right on over top of this once it's completely dry. I found this beautiful little wood corbel I had in my stash. I had to pick it up at a thrift store at some point from somewhere. It has a little hole in the back, and I'm like, we could definitely turn this into a beautiful stone shelf. How are we gonna do that? By all means, by adding this little joint right here that I picked up from Dollar Tree onto the top and giving it a nice paint job. I'm gonna be using DIY's paint in the letterpress. Feel free to use whatever chalk paint or type of paint that you want, and I highly recommend a gray tone. You could add a little bit of baking soda, you could give it some texture to create that actual stone effect. Lucky for me, this paint does a really good job of that all on its own. I love simple DIY projects like this that you can take and add a little bit of paint and maybe 2 or 3 pieces and create something completely different out of what you had, getting an amazing high-end look. Once both pieces were completely dry, I took some of my favorite Type Bond wood glue and a little bit of hot glue and plopped right onto the top of this corbel. This way that wood glue is giving me a nice long hold, and that hot glue is gonna get on there right immediately to hold it in place while the wood glue is drying. Once your piece is completely dry, if you wanna plop a sealer over top of this, you go right ahead. Let me know in the comments below if you love creating pieces with corbels. For this high-end riser, we're gonna need a little candle holder from Dollar Tree, one of these wood pieces from Dollar Tree, and some of this metal lace. Paint your pieces whatever color you want. I'm gonna be using Waverly chalk paint in the Snow White color. I decided to paint everything completely separate. If you want to glue everything together and then paint it because it will be easiest for you, by all means, go right ahead. I didn't have a rhyme or reason why I was necessarily doing it like this. It's just how I decided to go about it. But I will tell you, painting this metal lace, it is not my favorite pastime, people. To attach everything, I decided to use a mix of Gorilla Glue gel and hot glue. That way I get my long-lasting hold and I have an immediate hold with the hot glue. I also trust my Gorilla Glue gel, so I know that it's going to make sure everything stays in its place, especially since we're going to be putting glue on glass and metal and just different types of materials. It makes me feel a little bit fuzzier inside. And people, if you have never finagled this metal lace around anything in particular, get out your patient caps, okay? Because you're going to need some patience. Truth be told, it took me a good 15 minutes to get this really situated and curved, because as you bend, pieces are starting to pop one way, pop another way. So you got to keep pulling it away from your piece and bending as you go to make sure it curves properly, especially as you're putting the glue on so it presses against the glue. As always, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, people, and until next time.